The lights are off. They have been off since 9 o'clock, and that was normal. The power company had sent a notice, scheduled maintenance, a routine thing. Nothing unusual about that. But something is wrong with the silence. You have heard silence before. Real silence. The kind that settles over an empty house at the end of a long night. That silence has a texture to it. It breathes. It has the small sounds that fill the spaces between quiet. The creak of wood cooling, the low hum of something electrical in the walls. This is not that. This silence is occupied. You can feel it the same way you feel when someone is standing just outside a door that has not opened yet. Not a sound, not a movement, just the weight of something present that does not want to be seen. Dale Mercer had lived on that property for 11 years. He knew every sound that house made. He knew which floorboard groaned near the back hallway. He knew how the wind moved through the gap under the east-facing window. He knew this place the way only someone who has spent thousands of nights alone inside it can know a place. And in 11 years, the silence had never felt like this. There was a man in the dark with him. He just did not know it yet. The Harlow property sits about 14 miles outside a small town called Grover's Bluff in the hill country of central Texas. If you have ever driven through that part of the state, the long, flat stretches that eventually fold into low hills, the cedar and mesquite pressing close to the road, the sky so wide it feels like it is leaning down on you, then you know the kind of place this is. The main house is a low ranch-style structure, cream-colored stucco, a wraparound porch that looked better in photographs than in person. Behind it, a stretch of fenced pasture, a weathered barn, a small bunkhouse where Dale had lived since the week he was hired. The land itself was about 200 acres, mostly dormant these days. The Harlow family had not farmed it in 20 years. Dale Mercer was 53 when this happened, a quiet man, the kind of person you would describe as solid, not in a physical way, but in the way some people carry themselves. Deliberate, unhurried. He had worked outdoor jobs his whole life, mostly maintenance and groundskeeping, and he had ended up at the Harlow property after answering a classified ad in a regional paper that no longer exists. The owner, a man named Preston Harlow, was a commercial real estate developer based out of Houston. He was successful in the way that certain men are successful, constantly traveling, constantly on the phone, always in the middle of something that could not wait. Preston did not come to Grover's Bluff often, maybe 5 or 6 times a year. He valued the property as an asset, as an inheritance from his father, as something he intended to deal with eventually. In the meantime, he valued Dale. Dale kept the fences, kept the irrigation running, kept the pest situation under control, which in Central Texas was a full-time occupation by itself. He filed monthly maintenance reports that Preston rarely read, and twice a year, when Preston came down with his wife Cassandra, Dale would make sure the house was clean and stocked and the porch lights were working. That was the arrangement. It had worked for 11 years. The one small detail, the one you won't think about again until you need to, is this. Preston had mentioned the last time he called that he had recently updated his will. He said it casually, the way people mention things they don't think are important. He said he was having some issues with Cassandra. Nothing serious, just the kind of friction that builds up in a long marriage, and his lawyer had advised him to get his paperwork in order. He laughed when he said, Dale did not think about it again. He should have. The letter from the power company arrived on a Tuesday. Scheduled outage, 9 in the evening to 3 in the morning every night for the following week, while the regional grid underwent infrastructure upgrades. Dale read it twice, set it on the kitchen counter of the main house, and drove into Grover's Bluff to pick up flashlights, candles, and a battery-powered lantern. He was back before dark. The first thing he noticed was the gate. He had latched it when he drove out that afternoon. He was certain of it, the kind of certainty that comes from 11 years of habit. You latch the gate, you check it, you move on. He had done it so many times that his hands did it without his mind fully participating. The gate was open. Not swung wide, just unlatched, pushed slightly so that it had drifted a few inches on its hinges. A small thing, the kind of thing a gust of wind could do if the latch had been loose. Dale checked the latch. It was not loose. He closed it and drove through. He told himself it was nothing. Animals sometimes pressed against the fence. Maybe a deer had worked it loose. Maybe he had not latched it as firmly as he thought. These were all reasonable explanations, and Dale was a reasonable man, and so he chose one and moved forward. That night, around 11 o'clock, when Dale was sitting in the bunkhouse reading a book, he heard something from the direction of the main house. He lowered the book. He listened. It was not a dramatic sound. It was not glass breaking or a door slamming. It was something quieter than that. A low, rhythmic creak, almost like a rocking chair coming from the main house porch, roughly 40 yards away. He stood at the bunkhouse window for a full 2 minutes and stared into the dark. He could see the porch. There was enough moonlight for that. And there was nothing on the porch, nothing moving. Still, the sound had stopped the moment he started listening for it. He told himself the house was settling. Old structures do that. Expand and contract with the temperature, moan a little as the night cools them down. He told himself this, and he went back to his book. But he did not read another page. And the next morning, when he walked to the main house to check things over as he did every day, he found the front door unlocked. He had a key. He always had a key. He did not need the front door to be unlocked, but it was. Dale called Preston that afternoon. He kept it brief. He said there had been some things he wanted to mention. The gate, the sound the previous night, the unlocked door. He said he was not trying to be alarmist. He just wanted Preston to know. Preston listened and then was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Do not worry about it." He said Dale was probably more on edge than usual because of the power outages, being out there in the dark for 6 hours every night. He said he was going to come down at the end of the week anyway. He had been meaning to. There were some things he needed to collect from the house, and he would sort everything out when he got there. He said, try to get some sleep. That night, the power went out at exactly 9 o'clock. Dale was already in the bunkhouse with his lantern lit. He had eaten early. He had checked the locks on the bunkhouse door, both of them, and he had settled in to wait out the dark. At 10:45, he heard footsteps on the gravel path between the bunkhouse and the main house. Not an animal, not the wind. Footsteps. The deliberate, weighted sound of a person walking carefully, trying not to make noise and not fully succeeding. Dale heard 3, maybe 4 steps, and then they stopped. He did not move. He turned off the lantern and sat perfectly still in the dark, and he listened. Nothing for a long time. Long enough that he began to wonder if he had imagined it, long enough that his breathing had slowed back toward normal and his hands had unclenched, and he was starting to think about turning the lantern back on. Then something pressed against the bunkhouse window from the outside. Not a knock, not a tap, just pressure. Like a hand laid flat against the glass, testing it. Dale was on his feet. He grabbed the flashlight, not the lantern, the flashlight, because it was narrow and bright and he could aim it, and he crossed to the window and shone it through the glass in one motion. Nothing. The beam cut across empty gravel, the fence line, the edge of the barn. No one. Nothing. Not even a disturbance in the dust where someone would have been standing. He checked the door. Still locked. Both locks. He stood there for 11 minutes holding that flashlight and watching the window, and he did not hear another sound. But here's the thing that broke him. When he finally made himself sit back down, he put the flashlight on the table and looked across the small room. The window on the opposite wall, the one that faced away from the main house, the one that faced out toward the back pasture and the cedar trees and the long empty dark, had a handprint on it. On the inside. Someone had been in the bunkhouse, and they had left, and Dale had not heard the door. He did not sleep. He sat in the center of the room with the flashlight in his lap, and both locks checked, and the windows closed, and he did not sleep. By the time the power came back on at 3 in the morning, he had made a decision. He was going to leave. He was going to get in his truck, drive to Grover's Bluff, and call Preston from a diner at 4 in the morning if he had to. He was done. He picked up his keys from the table. He went to the door. He unlocked the first lock. Then he heard Preston's voice, coming from the main house, low, conversational, the way Preston spoke on the phone. One-sided, pausing for the other person to talk, then resuming. Dale knew that voice. He had heard it for 11 years. But it was 3 in the morning. Preston was not supposed to arrive until the end of the week, and the voice was not coming from the porch or the front entry. It was coming from deep inside the main house, from the back, from the direction of the study. Imagine for a moment that you are standing in a dark doorway, keys in your hand, and the person you trusted to be 300 miles away is speaking quietly in the dark building in front of you. Do you run, or do you need to understand what you are hearing first? Dale understood something in that moment that no reasonable explanation would reach. This was not supernatural. This was not the house settling or the wind through a gap or an animal pressing against a window. Whatever was happening here was planned. He thought about the open gate. He thought about the unlocked front door. He thought about the handprint on the inside of his window and the footsteps that should not have been there, and the 6 hours of dark every night that had been announced in advance to anyone who lived on or near the property. He thought about Preston's offhand comment about updating his will, and then he thought about the fact that Preston's voice was in that house right now, except Preston's car was not in the drive. He stepped back inside the bunkhouse. He locked the door, and he called Preston's cell number. It rang 4 times. Preston picked up. His voice was groggy, confused. He said, "Dale, what time is it?" Dale said, "I need you to tell me exactly where you are right now." A pause. Preston said, "I am at home in Houston. I have been home all week. What is going on?" The voice in the main house was still talking. Dale told Preston to stay on the line and not to say another word. He set the phone on the table, speaker facing up, and he picked up the heaviest thing in the bunkhouse, a long-handled pipe wrench he kept near the door for the irrigation valves, and he unlocked both locks and he stepped outside. The air was cool and still. The lights were back on. A single bulb burned over the main house porch. He crossed the gravel slowly. Every footstep felt enormous. He reached the front door of the main house and tried the handle. Unlocked again. He went inside. The voice had stopped. The front room was empty. The kitchen was empty. He moved through both with the wrench raised, and every light he passed he turned on, until the house was lit from one end to the other, and there was nowhere left for the dark to hide anything. He pushed open the study door. There was a man sitting in Preston's chair behind Preston's desk. He was not Preston. He was younger than Preston by 20 years, wearing dark clothes with a prepaid cell phone on the desk in front of him and a set of keys in his hands that Dale recognized immediately. They were the spare keys to the main house, the ones that had always hung on a hook inside the kitchen. The man did not run. He looked at Dale with a kind of flat calm that was more frightening than panic would have been. Then he looked past Dale toward the doorway, as if he was expecting someone who had not arrived yet. His phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen. Dale saw the name on the screen from across the room. It said Cassandra. Dale thought about the unlocked door, about the gate left open, about the scheduled power outages, public information, publicly announced, the kind of thing anyone could look up, about the fact that he was alone out here every night for 6 hours in the dark, and that Preston's will had recently been updated, and that Preston had mentioned friction in his marriage, the ordinary kind, the kind that builds in a long marriage under financial pressure. The plan had not been to haunt the property. The plan had been to frighten the caretaker badly enough that he would leave, or that he would not be believed when he talked about what he had seen. An unstable groundskeeper reporting things in the dark, a man rattled by power outages, a man who could not be trusted as a witness. Because someone needed this house empty and unobserved for a night. because something was going to happen here that required no witnesses. Dale put the wrench down on the desk, picked up the prepaid phone before the man could reach it, and walked back to the bunkhouse without another word. He picked up his own phone, where Preston was still on the line, and said, "You need to call the sheriff's department in Grover's Bluff right now, and then you need to get in your car." He said, "Do not call Cassandra first." He said, "Trust me on that." The detail from early in the story, the one about the will, the one Preston had laughed off. Preston had told Cassandra about it too. Of course he had. He was her husband. He had told her the paperwork was being updated, that everything would be in order. He had said it the same offhand way he said everything. He had not realized what he was telling her. He had not realized what she heard. 2 county deputies arrived at the Harlow property at 4:37 in the morning. The man in the study was still there when they did. He had nowhere to go. Dale had his keys. What came out over the following weeks, the calls, the planning, the arrangement between Cassandra and a man she had been in contact with for nearly 8 months, is the kind of story that makes the evening news for 3 days and then disappears. Preston survived it. He sold the property that winter. Dale found work on a cattle operation farther east. None of those details are the part that stays with me. The part that stays with me is this. The haunting was designed. Every element of it, the sounds, the presence in the dark, the feeling that something unseen was watching, had been engineered by someone who understood one thing very clearly, that a person alone in an isolated place, without light, without certainty, without any way to verify what they are experiencing, will reach for the supernatural before they reach for the truth. Because the supernatural feels less threatening than the truth. Because a ghost cannot take your life in the way that a human can. Because the darkness we project on old houses and empty rooms is a protection, not a fear. It lets us believe that whatever's wrong out there is ancient and unknowable, and not something a person who once sat across from us at a table could have put there. I think about all the stories we label as paranormal, all the presences felt in isolated places, all the sounds in the dark that could not be explained, all the moments where something ordinary became something charged with dread. How many of them were exactly what they appeared to be? Something wrong in the dark, just not the kind of wrong we were expecting. Dale Mercer said one thing in the only interview he ever gave about what happened. He said the most frightening moment of the whole night was not the handprint on the window, or the footsteps on the gravel, or the voice in the dark. The most frightening moment was when he realized that every single thing he had experienced had been a choice someone else made. Every moment of dread had been authored. Every fear had been delivered deliberately with his name on it. Lock your doors tonight, not because of what might be out there in the dark, because of who. This is After the Horror. We begin where the story should have ended.